You saw on your television screens. When they went into that Superdome, I knew then that there was trouble. The reports came out. There's one police officer, New Orleans police officer, he's a sergeant, his name is Joel Silva, gave an interview yesterday. And he was stationed at one of the local colleges where people were being sheltered. And when the helicopters arrived, he said, we thank God that the helicopters arrived, but our major problem is that we had to beat back the men because they tried to get on the helicopters before the women did. We literally had to beat them. And then that black police officer said this. He said, you know, we got a whole lot of black men that ain't nothing but cowards. They're just sick to your stomach. But look at a black man. Now we're trying to get on the copters. They don't care nothing about the women or the babies. I've been saying it all along. Black men, they are despicable. And they've been trained to be that way by your preachers and by your leaders. They are a despicable lot. They killed one man out in front of the convention center because he tried to rape a 13-year-old girl, and the people just couldn't take it no more. They stomped him until they stomped the life out of him. They murdered. People are trying to keep themselves shelter from the storm, and you got black men in the shelter shooting and raping and maiming. What is wrong with y'all? Who is it that has taught y'all to be? Y'all are a despicable, despisable group. You are wicked, incorrigible people, you black people. You are cursed and incorrigible. And there's no hiding it. I don't care what your leaders say. And then here come Carol Moseley Braun and all the black pundits blaming George Bush. Bush ain't had nothing to do with the fact how wicked y'all are killing one another. People are trying to survive, and they can't even lay down without being raped by some old no-good, low-life black man. You know, it would seem to me, okay, here we are, 10,000 strong, women and children. We're all huddled together. Like Zora Neale Hurston's, their eyes were watching God as that hurricane came through. It would seem to me that the men would establish a bulwark. Say, all right, here's what we're going to do. Put 100 men over here, 100 men by the bathrooms, 100 men by the door, 100 men to take a boat and go out and alert the Coast Guard. We're going to have men selling this. We're going to establish how to run the bathrooms. We're going to set up a food line. We're going to set up security. We're going to make sure there's plenty of water. We're going to go out. We're going to establish a structure in here so that we can live. We are men defending our women and our children. That's who we are, and that's what we're going to do. And when the cavalry would have arrived, they would have found it all as well, because the black woman is in the hand of the black man.
Back in Britain, exhausted, traumatized but safe, these three friends had been traveling together. Their holiday ended sheltering at the Superdome in New Orleans, packed in with 20,000 others.
Disgusting, it was scary, it was chaos, it was just horrible.
Little food and water, appalling sanitation, stifling heat, reports of stabbings and beatings, and foreign nationals say they were threatened and had to be moved in secret for their own protection.
There was 100 of us international, and basically we were really getting threatened racially, and you know, you just walk down the corridors and everybody would just stare at you as though you were completely utterly different, and so intimidating.
At first they were taken to an adjacent medical centre with other Britons.
Every single one of us helped out, either wheeling ill patients to helicopter pads, looking after children who'd been lost in the Superdome and can't find mum and dad. I was clearing up round the ward when they were performing operations.
Shared horrors that have left them shaken and will not easily be forgotten. Daniel Bircher,
me and my
BBC
friends
News.
were by ourselves, and we were I've never been so scared in my life of what to do. We eventually found some other tourists, and then, you know, we were just getting abused and attacked by it just turned racial, and there was about 100 people who were white, and the rest of them were just black, and they would just chugging bottles at us and everything else like that. And in the toilets, you just couldn't stand the smell. You could smell it everywhere, and I've never been so scared in my life.
Now, I know you were there with a group of girls as well. You put them in the centre for their safety, but presumably you couldn't guarantee people's safety the whole of the time. What sort of stories were you hearing about what was going on?
Well, on our first night there, apparently the generators were going to run out, which means all the lights were going to go out insane. And the guards told us that if the lights went out, they were going to evacuate and just stay by the doors for their own safety. So they put all the women in the middle, and all the men went on the outside, just to try and protect them if anything could happen, because the women were getting threatened with rape. And if the lights went out, who knows what would have happened, but the lights didn't go out in the end. But that night, nobody got any sleep, and again, it was just so scary. I can't explain the kind of conditions we were living in, but we didn't have any food, any water, the smell, the sanitation, everything there was just hell.
And in terms of the authorities whose job is to try and help people in this situation, including the British Embassy, presumably in your case, what help were you getting?
Well, with the British Embassy, I've never known such a useless bunch of people in my life. The only time I've had contact with the British Embassy was when we had our 15-hour bus journey from New Orleans to Dallas last night, which we got at 1:30 in the morning. That's when we first saw them. I saw them for 5 minutes, and I had American friends picking me up at where we dropped off. When we were there, we were being shipped about from our own safety by armed guards. The press managed to get in, but the British Embassy didn't. I don't understand why the British Embassy couldn't get in.
This is David Duke. Whites in New Orleans are facing rape and genocide at the hands of black mobs. I can't believe that I'm writing these words. I'm always careful not to overstate things, not to exaggerate. I'm not exaggerating now. All the things I've written about and warned about for years are coming true in a great American city. A beautiful American city, in the very moments as you read these words. I lost my home since childhood in New Orleans, the waters to the attic. My daughter lost her car and all her possessions. Fortunately, we were not in New Orleans when the storm hit. Even with those heart-wrenching losses, my daughter and I are among the lucky ones. Many thousands of European Americans are not so lucky. They now face absolute terror. And because of a near-press blackout, most people outside of the ones who are under siege don't even know that these white people are being racially targeted. The victims have no way to communicate their plight to the outside world. There's no electricity, no phones. Any batteries, any cell phones, any other equipment has gone. They are totally without communication of any sort. Many whites stayed in their homes because they were either too sick or infirm to leave, or simply because they had a suspicion that they would have to protect their homes from criminal elements, the same criminal element that makes New Orleans one of the most dangerous cities in America, even in times of relative calm. Even though the jails are always bursting with apprehended criminals, the only thing that has stood between having a situation like Somalia or Rwanda and was that thin blue line of police with high-powered weapons and the punishment that awaited a tsunami of potential lawbreakers. When the gasoline tanks in the police cars went dry, when the batteries went dead in their radios, when the lights and alarms went out in the streets, New Orleans turned into Somalia. And now white people are the brunt of racial attacks, murder, rape, and mayhem. I am not talking about the fact that whites are simply victims of indiscriminate black crime. I'm telling you that whites are being racially targeted for rape, assault, and murder. And it's not just me saying this. Even though you have to look hard to find it in our biased press, you can find the evidence in quotes on ABC News and from leading journalists around the world. In fact, the foreign press in America has reported it far more accurately than the American press has. The controlled media here is doing everything it can to hide the racial component to the robbery, rape, and murder. Still, Americans watching the spontaneously shot videos are gradually beginning to get the idea. Here's an excerpt from the Manchester Evening News in the United Kingdom. There's a typo that needs to be fixed, by the way. British students reported the horror of death and rape. The early morning blasts were a few miles south of the French Quarter and jolted residents awake. The extent of any possible damage was not immediately known. The explosions came as British students caught up in the horror of Hurricane Katrina spoke of their 4 days of hell at the New Orleans Superdome. They described how their place of refuge descended into a scene of terror as people ran wild with knives and guns, used crack cocaine, and hurled racial abuse. Tourists, meanwhile, were turned out of hotels to face terror on the streets. Debbie Durso of Washington, Michigan, said she asked a police officer for assistance, and his response was, "Go to hell. It's every man for himself." Up to 30 British students huddled among the thousands in the Superdome were forced to set up a makeshift security cordon to fend off abusive locals. Now, of course, locals is obviously a code word for the black mob. Jamie Trout, 22, an economics student from Sunderland, kept a record of his terrifying ordeal. He wrote, "It was like something out of Lord of the Flies. 1 minute everything is calm and civil, the next it descends into chaos. A man has been arrested for raping a 7-year-old in the toilet. This place is hell. The smell is horrendous. There are toilets overflowing and people everywhere." Jamie, who has been coaching football to disabled children as part of his Camp America scheme, said people were shouting racial abuse at the Britons because they were white. And this from Australian journalist, as printed in a major Australian news service, news.com.au. Hurricanes Trail of Anarchy. Here's the first paragraph, a paragraph that wouldn't dare to be printed or written in the American press. Explosion, fire on the east side of New Orleans. Thousands of U.S. National Guardsmen were heading for New Orleans last night with orders to shoot to kill as armed African-American gangs terrorized the city devastated by Hurricane Katrina. Quote, "Police escorted a group of white tourists, including Australian Anthony Hopes, 30, away from the Superdome after they were subjected to race threats. The tourists are now under armed guard in the foyer of the Hilton Hotel." Now, ladies and gentlemen, nothing about this appeared in the American press. It's been very reluctant to even identify the criminals as African Americans. But if you scan the American press, you can quickly discover the racial hatred and the violence that's going on against white people. And here's another excerpt from an AP story. "Thousands still stranded as chaos reigns." This is by Dave Davies and Catherine Lucy. Also appeared in Philly.com. Police Chief Eddie Compass said there was such a crush around